there are many years in gaming. We've seen the year of the horse, the year of the bow, but now it's the year of promises, and that means The Division. It actually came out, Lawrence.
Man, that was a good intro. I didn't know where you were going with that one.
Well, it's been like 3 years when we saw a man close a door with his hand, and the world stood at attention and said, I can't wait to do that, and now we did.
Yeah, Ubisoft made an entire world of slightly ajar doors.
So, Lawrence, you sat down with The Division on PC.
Holy shit, I've played it so much.
Real quick, disclaimer, how many hours did you put into this little piece of tech?
I think I'm at 35 right now.
Okay, so you feel like you have a valid opinion.
I do. At least when it comes to the game itself. I put some time into endgame, but not enough to really get into it, and yeah, fuck it, man. We have jobs. Excuse me. We have jobs. I don't know how much I should get into the disclaimer process, but we've been playing games for a long time. We don't really have the time to dedicate 120 hours to an individual game, and something like The Division is particularly difficult because it is built to be played that long if you have the temperament.
It is a time suck. All right, let's get into it.
Sure.
We are reviewing
In reviewing
The Division.
Echo available for playback nearby.
Okay, first up, my question for you, Lawrence. For those who have no idea what The Division is, what is The Division? Who are the Divisionaries?
That's actually a really good question because none of the preview material on this game really laid out what it is. It's not an MMO, and I think that's the first thing straight up. It is an open world game that has a number of player hubs that you can matchmake with other players, but you will, on the game proper, not in the dark zone, we'll get into that later, but in the game proper, you will only ever see up to 3 other players. You can get into a party of 4, and then roll around this open world doing missions, shooting dudes, getting loot. That's about it. Oh, collecting intel. That's right.
Now let's say for someone who has really no idea what this game is about, it looks like Gears of War meets Destiny. Is that correct?
That's extremely correct. If Destiny is, the evolution of Halo or whatever, essentially it's taking mobile game progression mechanics and slapping it onto a AAA game. That's what The Division is. Although it does it really well, but holy shit, there are progress bars everywhere for everything. Everything can level up. Everything's gated by something that you have to make a bar fill up to increase a number again. It just has a lot of different ways that you can see numbers get bigger. Whether that's gear, skills, or the various ways you can level up. So yeah, it's just a variety of bars that you can push up at different rates, and that makes people happy.
Now, I personally sunk some hours into the game, and I have a question.
Yeah.
What the hell is the story?
Okay. There is a story in the game. The setting is different. So the setting is like, there is a variant of smallpox that broke out in New York. You kind of discover the backstory of it through intels and pick-upables throughout the world, and it's actually pretty well done that way, but virus breaks out, society collapses, it's lawlessness, it's gangs, but then the Division is activated. So apparently there are these super elite agents seeded into American society that are called upon when times get really bad, and they have this little Samsung Gear watch that lights up when it's time to get real, which is to say grab a gun and go outside and shoot somebody. So in the setting of the game, you're part of what's called the second wave. So apparently there was this first wave of Division agents that rolled into New York. Nobody really knows what happens to them. You find some of them throughout the backstory that's seeded into the world, but the plot of the game is more about discovering the nature of the virus outbreak, the companies that were involved with it, the cover-ups that happened, and then the various characters that went through the virus apocalypse and how have emerged on the other side. So, there's kind of a struggle for power among some warring factions in Manhattan now, and by the end of the game, you shoot a big helicopter. Spoilers.
So that's why we gotta hold the line against anyone, and I don't care if they say this from the government. You know they're lying.
Is the story interesting enough to keep you going?
It's an interesting question because there are a few different ways that you interact with the story or the setting. So the setting, in as much as it allows you to run around a deserted Manhattan, like covered in snow and with like beautiful graphic and lighting effects, that's cool. Ubisoft games have kind of been on this track for a while where instead of taking you on a hallway through this area, they just let you loose in Rome or another location from Assassin's Creed. Colonial America. That aspect of it is always pretty good because their environmental design is pretty on point. It's just fun to run around these cool locations. So being able to just like go up a ladder and run across rooftops and look at the skyline, that's cool. As far as the story itself, I actually did enjoy learning about the backstory through all the little intel pickups in the game. There are a number of them. The coolest one are called echoes. So you'll find these little nodes that once you examine them, they explode into this like still 3D scene of some kind of event unfolding, whether it's just people like fighting over food, or even like a pre-outbreak scenario of like a news reporter trying to break a story. You can piece together a lot of really cool mini stories that happened before the apocalypse through all these pickups, and it's kind of fun to connect the dots because there are some characters that will appear in one audio log on one side of the island, and then that character will appear in another thing on another side of the island, but they happen at different times. So you kind of get this back narrative in your head that starts building up as you play. That's pretty neat.
Sir, you need to move.
Get your hands off me!
I don't expect everybody's going to want to pay that much attention to little dog tags you find on the ground, though.
With a world that is as persistent as something like The Division or Destiny like that, a growing concern from a lot of people, including myself, is does your character actually make a difference?
No, of course not. There's a story, or rather there are a series of story missions, and by the end of it, they do a good job of verbally patting you on the back, saying, "Oh, Agent, you've done so much for us, you're so great, now we have hope," or whatever. But at the end of it, you're standing on a mountain of dead corpses, and you have a different jacket and a different gun. It's not like you can, as one player, drastically affect the world of The Division, because it's meant to be shared. So, in as much as you want to feel like you've done something because your gear is better, that's fine, but I wouldn't say it's going to really like make you feel warm and fulfilled. That's kind of the point. It's to make you always hungry for the next level up.
It appears that Ubisoft is just doing what every other game company is doing and giving you content to keep you coming back little by little.
Yeah, that's how games are nowadays. They can't give you a game over screen, then you'll just go play something else. So you got to keep going back to this, pay for season passes. There's just a lot of little hooks in this game to keep you interested. Whether or not you enjoy it, it's kind of up to you.
It's a brave new world. Tom Clancy fan.
Alert. Intercepting JTF radio traffic.
Taking small arms fire! Small arms fire! Who's have us in their sight? JTF, hearing this?
Okay, so I think we've tackled the story enough. If people are interested in that, I guess they can play it for themselves, even though you completely spoiled the ending, you son of a bitch.
Yeah.
Let's go over to the controls. How does the game actually play? Is it fun?
It's fun enough. The controls work. They do what they need to do. They're pretty responsive. The animations look really, really good. Once you get a certain level of mastery with the controls, you can do some cool stuff, some cool maneuvering stuff. It's essentially Gears of War. Like, it's got the roadie run, it's got snap to cover, it's got vaulting, it's got something that's been in a few games where if you're in cover and you can look down and see a different piece of cover, you just hold a button, your guy will run there automatically. So the movement and the shooting, it's all pretty on point. It's just fun to play, so it feels good. And even on top of that, you can switch guns. So like playing with a shotgun is different than playing with a marksman rifle, they're called, or an SMG versus a machine gun. And then it gets even deeper. You can spec out your skills and your perks to match the gun and the playstyle you're doing. So you can stack armor, or like these perks that increase your armor while you're dashing to cover and things like that. Provided that you want to start digging into that stuff, you can find a decent amount of gameplay complexity there.
Like I said, I only had a few hours with the game, but I had noticed some repetition in the enemy types. Do they ever become any different than just guys with guns, bats, or shields?
Sometimes they have flamethrowers.
Okay, I ran into those too. You shoot the bottle in the back and they explode.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's about it.
That's it. There's three major factions, yeah. There's Rikers. No, let's see here. There's Cleaners, Rikers, FNB, or some acronym of some kind of new army, and then just generic, I almost said black. They're black, fuck it. Generic thugs.
Wow.
With bandanas and guns.
We say urban in the land of Tom Clancy.
Sorry, African Clancy, American.
It's made by French people, it's okay.
It's true. They can't be racist. They're so smart. No, the enemy types don't really change. It's more the enemy archetypes, so if you're fighting enemies, they'll have certain icons above their heads. A lightning bolt enemy will charge at you with a shotgun. A sniper enemy with a little crosshair reticle will just post up and snipe you. There are like tank enemies. Essentially, they just boil down into enemy types, and you see those get reskinned for the different factions, but that's essentially what you're dealing with. Maybe 5 or 6 enemies total. It's more about the health scaling, because holy shit, they can be very bullet spongy, and the combination in which they throw them at you, and the environment they throw them at you. So fighting a bunch of enemies in a small corridor is different than fighting a bunch of enemies in an open arena, and you have to adjust accordingly. For the game to scale up in difficulty, they essentially just multiply the enemy health by 10. So they just make massive bullet sponges, and they have just like huge health bars. The only cool thing about that is that they partially acknowledge that in the gameplay. So like you said, there's enemies that have tanks on their backs. Other enemies have like really tiny bullet pouches. Essentially, it's a weak spot, and if you shoot it enough, it will start blowing up. And then the guy will be like slapping his back and stuff and like spinning around. So that makes him pop up from cover, and it does a pretty generous amount of damage to him. So instead of just shooting a guy in the face a lot, which you will also do if you decide to play the Division, you can use team mechanics and tactics to flank around enemies and hit them in the back, and then you can down enemies much faster, which you need to do later on once they just start dumping waves and waves of guys on you.
Now, you mentioned that there are abilities that you unlock through the game. I had got a few in there. Is there anything in there that really drastically changes the gameplay? Is the turret that much more interesting than the time detonator explosion thing I had?
Sort of. It depends, and this is going to seem like a cop-out answer, but it really depends how much you want to experiment with it. I think that you can stack your skills and skill modifications and perks. No, wait, talents. Perks are something else. Jesus Christ. There's just a lot of unlockable shit in this game. But once you experiment with those skills and you find a combination that works well, especially with the aforementioned mechanic of circling around enemies, then it starts to open up possibilities. If you're a thinking kind of player. So, let's say you have the turret. Just throwing out a turret shoots at people, fine. You can just throw it right next to you and shoot at guys and get a boost to your DPS. Or you can throw a turret, have it shoot at somebody, suppress them, circle around them, then shoot them in the back and kill them even faster. That's kind of rewarding when you start to think and use your knowledge of the game mechanics to be more efficient at murdering guys, but that's really what it comes down to. Again, it goes back to Destiny. It's not really how good you are, it's how quickly you can beat the same challenge over and over.
A big feature of the game is the drop-in, drop-out co-op random matchmaking. Did you find yourself either playing more by yourself, or did you really need allies to get through the game?
I sort of split it. I liked playing by myself because it was harder. It's just part and parcel of playing on the internet is if you team up with people, it's just more guns. And even if they're bad, they're going to be shooting more, and that helps to a degree. If you get with a really good team, you can get into a vibe, and it feels pretty great. It's pretty similar to an MMO, actually. When you're just going through a dungeon, and yeah, the game's story missions are basically analogous to dungeons. It's more of a directed, crafted experience. But yeah, if you want a team of three other Division agents are just fucking slamming it, killing guys, throwing out heals and crazy rolly bombs that explode and cool turrets, it's kind of a neat experience. Especially if you're in a big fight and there's just explosions and flashbangs going off everywhere and dudes are blowing up and bodies are flying. It's a neat feeling. I wouldn't say that it's transformative though. Like I said before, I kind of played alone for most of it because I liked really testing the game's mechanics, because I like playing a video game instead of just a grind simulator.
Overall, the game feels like, to me, from at least what I played, like a safe bet. I feel like it's new and old all over again. It's a very pretty game, but there's not really much of a reason for me to go back.
I can't really argue with that, especially if you or you listener are at the point in your life where you can afford games that you want and kind of want more unique experiences. I'd say if money's tight, Destiny's the Division.
Oops.
Yeah, I knew I was going to do that at some point. The Division's a pretty good bet because it's essentially the endless progression illusion, really, of Destiny or any MMO, but it has more content than Destiny did. It's got more stuff that justifies its open world, so Destiny just had random crafting drops, essentially, that would spawn. The Division has that too. It has like fabric rooms that you go to find fabric for crafting because that's in the game as well. But you know, all the aforementioned intel items are actually pretty cool to get. Walking around the world is actually pretty more interesting. It's more detailed than Destiny was. So I think if you want a game that you theoretically could play forever, it may not be fun forever, but you could play it forever. The Division's a pretty good pick.
I might be a strange test case for this whole thing because I am actually just kind of in a strange time in my life where time is usually the thing I need. I can afford to play games. I don't really have the time. So I see a game like The Division or Destiny, and all I see is a time suck. And I see doing the same thing over and over. So when I play for the first 5 to 6 hours, I feel like I figured it out. Like I already kind of got it, and the story personally wasn't enough for me to go back. And it is a game that I do kind of want to play with friends, but it's not really sinking its claws into me. Did it do that for you? Did you feel that hit?
It did eventually. It took around 12 hours because yeah, I totally get what you mean. It's easy to play the Division and feel like you have seen everything there is to see in about 2.5, 3 hours, especially once you go around the minimap a little bit, you hit the various icons, you're like, oh, that's what this mission's like, that's what that mission's like, play a story mission, be like, okay, I feel like I got the flow now. And then, you know, you do the Ubisoft thing where you zoom out and you look at the whole map, and you're like, oh, that's what this is, all the way around. Okay. I got there, but, you know, maybe it's reviewer's fatigue, but I was like, switching up my gun, switching up my loadouts, and that freshened it up a little bit. It did force me to play in different ways. At the beginning, it was really easy to just sit back with a marksman rifle and a good scope and just shoot guys in the head. Because they would just run at you in a straight line and be like, bang, 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 this is boring. But after a while, that stopped working because they would throw enemy types and enemy combinations at me that didn't allow me to just sit behind cover and shoot. They would throw grenades at me, there would be snipers that would just nail you the second you poke your head out. So I had to adapt. And to me, that's the fun part of the game, is when you think you got a good pace and then it just pushes you back and says, nope, you have to do this other thing now. And then the Dark Zone is kind of the ultimate version of that because it essentially puts you against other players in this whole other realm.
Patching into GTF transmission.
We're taking heavy fire. The LMB are... Shit, what the hell was that?
Now, I've heard about the Dark Zone. People have said it's like the DayZ portion of the game. Is that accurate, or is that just giving that or is that not giving the game enough credit?
That's an interesting comparison, and I can see why somebody would say that. So just to set it up, the world. So like the Dark Zone is just this strip in the middle of Manhattan, and you kind of fight in a U shape around it. And if you're outside of the Dark Zone, it's essentially like Far Cry 4. Like it's a 4-player co-op open world action game, action RPG, whatever. When you go inside the Dark Zone, then it's a little more MMO-ish, where you can just run into other players who can kill you if they choose to. And also when you die in the Dark Zone, you drop all your loot right at your feet. Some of it drops publicly, some of it drops only for you. So if you get killed, you can go back and get some of your stuff back. Also, the Dark Zone has its own level. So to use some of the Dark Zone gear, you have to be certain Dark Zone level, which I think is just ludicrous. There's no reason there should be a separate leveling system aside from just give you another bar to fill up. There's also like contamination levels. You have to be certain levels to open treasure chests for all things. I don't know. That part is stupid, but the mechanics of the Dark Zone are pretty cool. The idea that you can roll around and get a lot of cool gear, and then that creates tension. It's kind of like getting really far in Dark Souls and wondering where your next bonfire is. So you get a lot of good gear, it's sitting in your backpack, you have to extract it via helicopters. You go and you call by shooting out a big flare, and when you do that, it alerts everybody that an extraction is coming, which, as another player, you know, oh, somebody's trying to get their gear out. And if they're doing that, they probably have some pretty good gear. So what you can do, as a player, is go and decide to ambush them, and kill them before the helicopter gets there, take their shit, and then extract it yourself. If you kill somebody, then you go rogue, and there are various levels of going rogue, but basically, the more people you kill, the higher level of rogue you get, and then it takes longer to lose your rogue status. When you do lose your rogue status, you get a bonus of experience and dark experience and all that stuff. If you get killed, you lose a shitload of Dark Zone experience. So it's all about escalating tension, which I really like. In practice, it hasn't really worked out that way. The practical losses of dying as a rogue do not remotely incentivize going rogue in the first place. It's a little steep right now, but they're already going to fix that in the next patch, or at least tweak it. So I have confidence that Ubisoft is going to make that Dark Zone experience what they intend, which is a really tense, scary sort of game mode where you go in, you're afraid of everything, you have to play super safe, you make your rounds, you kill some dudes, you get your loot, and then you have to extract in like the safest way possible. So stuff like you call in a plane and then maybe even leave a player out as a decoy. So when that person gets gunned down, you know exactly where somebody else is, your rest of your team gets them, you protect your gear until the guy comes back. There's a lot of cool possibilities there. I didn't experience many of those myself. Even as a loner, it was kind of fun to lone wolf in the Dark Zone and just kind of see those things happen. It was cool to watch players fight other players and just kind of come in like a vulture after the fact and pick up all the gear that got left behind. It was still exciting to try and extract stuff and get jumped myself, because it did happen. Those are kinds of experiences that don't really happen in modern games, ones that actively punish you for losing. So the fact that there is a punishment, even though it's, you know, intangible, it's just you lose some dark levels and some gear that you were looking forward to using. It's kind of a neat experience. I can't help but wonder how long it's going to be effective. You know, after you do something that's exciting enough times, it stops being exciting, so, you know, your 50th run through the Dark Zone, it's just like, oh, here's this asshole, oh, he shot me. Well, there's 2 hours of my life gone. Ugh. And you just shuffle off to the bathroom. I don't know. but it's fun. It's fun right now, and that's kind of the only thing I can say about a game like this, since it's going to be evolving and changing.
Well, overall, that was a lot of information. The final question is this game worth the wait?
The wait is hard to say, because that's essentially like, was it worth the hype or whatever? Mm-hmm. It's a fun game. I enjoyed it. Like I said, played it for 30 plus hours, and at the end of it, I feel like I had a fun game experience. I don't think it's too dissimilar, especially if you're playing it as a co-op, maybe single player game, from any of the other open world action games that Ubisoft puts out. Pretty similar, actually, in terms of mechanics. The Dark Zone stuff is kind of icing on the cake. I think that adds a lot of tail to it if you're the type of player that will enjoy that kind of experience. But even still, I think if you just pick it up and play through all the single player missions and maybe have some buds jump in and jump out, you're essentially looking at a Borderlands that's in a little more realistic trapping, and it looks cool. It looks really pretty, so I think it's pretty solid. I think it's a pretty solid game. I enjoyed it.
Well, as always, we do not give scores here, but we do like to rate with Sam Fishers. How many Sam Fishers out of 10 do you give The Division?
I'm gonna say it's 15 blinky green lights.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, and that's 3 lights per hat.
Yeah. That's 5 Fisher heads.
That's 5 Fisher heads. Wow. That is quite a score. Put that on Metacritic or whatever. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed our in-review of The Division. You know what? I'm gonna play it.
You're gonna go back?
I'm gonna do what you did. I'm gonna dump some stupid amount of money into my PC so I can play the game in 4K.
Shove a funnel in the back and start pouring it in.
I need liquid nitrogen to make it run fast.
Reduces fan noise.
I want to see the snow.
It's pretty snow. Oh my god. When it starts blowing around in the wind, I'm like, oh, it's affected by physics, man.
All right.
It's cool.
Let's go to the Dark Zone. You and me. Together.